But this movie should be called, they should call this movie Snow Woke and the Seven Pronouns. It's so bad. If you were to watch this movie on an aeroplane, Andrew, you'd walk out.
Yeah, my dad, the producer of an enormous piece of Disney IP with hundreds of millions of dollars on the line, had to leave his family to fly across the country to reprimand his 20-year-old employee for dragging her personal politics into the middle of promoting the movie, for which she signed a multi-million-dollar contract to get paid and do publicity for.
Interesting casting because this woman is extraordinarily woke.
After the box office flop, Snow White lost hundreds of millions of dollars for Disney. She decides to rage post behind every strong woman is herself. She continued celebrating herself by posting that she's in the #1 movie in the world, which is a remarkable thing to post when you are the laughingstock of an entire industry. This is what narcissism looks like.
I'm a narcissist. The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so.
Okay.
There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird. And then it became like, I will elbow everyone out of the way to play the part. That people will assume is a love story just because like we cast a guy in the movie, right. Andrew Burnap. All of Andrew's scenes could get cut. Who knows? It's Hollywood, baby.
I say, if I'm gonna stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed online.
And we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
Not gonna be saved by the prince.
She's not gonna be saved by the prince, and she's not gonna be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
Every time she speaks, she gets less likable. There's some clip of her on the internet in her Snow White outfit saying, every hour I am in the outfit of Snow White wearing the dress. All 18 hours, I deserve to be paid for every single one. Oh, really? Are you having trouble paying your bills, Rachel? Did Steven Spielberg not pay you for your role in West Side Story? Did Disney fail to give you a healthy paycheck for, like, cry me a river? She's just exactly everything that we can't stand.
About the box office disaster that is Disney's Snow White, and the lead actress's delusions of grandeur are not helping. Here she compares herself to a priceless piece of art, the Winged Victory.
To everyone who hates when I win, the Winged Victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still line up to see her. And I can only hope that despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them, that at every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
There was an in-depth piece, like a behind-the-scenes piece, talking about how they've been in a full meltdown about this girl for a couple of years now, and how they had her tweet out like a little, yay, Snow White, can't wait, so excited, I love to play her. And she did it and got like millions of views, and they were like, good job, Rachel. And then she, like, minutes later, followed it up with, and never forget, free Palestine. This is just like a few months after 10/7. It was like, it hadn't even been a year. And they were like, my God, what? They flew an executive, one of the producers, out to go visit personally with Rachel Zegler to say, could you please take that down?
While enjoying the vibe and excitement of the streets of London.
Hey, what?
3 of the most beautiful cities in Europe.
Rachel Zegler attempted to address the backlash surrounding her role in Disney's Snow White remake, but her approach only intensified criticism. In a viral video, she appeared visibly frustrated, oscillating between vulnerability and defiance. She insisted that despite the hate, audiences still supported her work. However, her attempt at self-defense came off as self-centered, with many perceiving her as dismissing valid criticisms. Instead of garnering sympathy, her remarks ignited further outrage. Before we dive further, make sure to subscribe to our channel for the latest updates. The video was meant to regain control of her narrative, but it had the opposite effect. Social media quickly dissected her words, turning what should have been a moment of clarification into an even bigger controversy. Instead of silencing critics, she gave them more ammunition.
To everyone who hates when I win, the Winged Victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still line up to see her. And I can only hope that despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them, that at every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
Once her video surfaced, it spread like wildfire. TikTok users stitched reactions that ranged from disbelief to outright mockery, with many mimicking her tone or using satire to ridicule her statements.
So people have been sharing how few people are going to see Disney's Snow White and how bad Gal Gadot is going to be in the movie and like all of that. But I thought this one was hilarious. One single person bought a seat in the middle of the theater. They probably gonna shut the lights out because they gonna think nobody showed up. But this is hilarious. Also kind of creepy. Like, bro, I would be so weirded out if I was the only person in a movie theater watching a movie.
X exploded with memes. Hashtags like Snowflop trended, and discussions quickly escalated into full-blown internet chaos. Screenshots of her past interviews resurfaced, adding fuel to the fire. Some even compiled old statements where she dismissed the original Snow White film, reinforcing the perception that she lacked respect for the project.
Longer 1937.
She's not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird. So we didn't do that this time.
Instead of calming the storm, her video became a catalyst for even more backlash. Public opinion swayed overwhelmingly against her, making her the focal point of a Hollywood PR disaster.
We can start out with the creative bankruptcy of remaking another animated classic instead of making something new. But yes, it's all Rachel Zegler and her behavior. And if it was just one comment, it probably would have been forgotten by now. But it was comment after comment, and it was pissing off everybody, pissing off old Disney fans, pissing off new Disney fans, pissing off Trump supporters, pissing off all of America. And it became such a disaster that they had to shut her up, which was the smartest move they made. But the onus is all on her and Disney's reaction to it. And quite frankly, if she has said nothing, her movie, probably still forgettable, would have done a lot better.
Despite Disney's usual dominance at the box office, Snow White struggled tremendously. With a reported $250 million budget, it only earned $45 million domestically during its opening weekend, a shocking underperformance for a Disney live-action remake. Comparisons were immediately drawn to The Little Mermaid, which, despite controversy, managed to pull in $95 million in its first weekend.
Just unfollow me. And I think a lot of people have just taken that advice and are not supportive of her projects. And in fact, if the film is as bad as they say, you're not going to go along and watch it anyway.
Analysts called the film a historic miscalculation, blaming both the negative press surrounding Zegler and the changes to the beloved story. The financial failure was a clear indicator that audiences were rejecting not just the film, but Zegler as its lead. Instead of being Disney's next big success, Snow White became an industry cautionary tale.
Had not fallen prey to wokeness and nonsense in recent years. Even if Disney still had the most talented people in the world working, with the best writers, with a good sense of narrative and the cultural moment, even if everything worked perfectly, it would have been almost impossible for this movie to succeed, because you're comparing it to one of the most beloved films of all time and a truly groundbreaking movie. And Disney was not sending its best. I sat through the whole thing. I don't want to say it was the worst movie I've ever seen. It wasn't. But every way that the movie changed the story from the original, the 1937 movie, or even from the original Grimm Brothers fairy tale, every way that Disney changed the story, it changed it for the worse. This was really bad. It was extremely leftist on every political dimension: racial politics, sexual politics, class politics, regime politics. Its narrative was cowardly. It was just off.
Theaters quickly responded to the disappointing box office numbers. Major chains began removing Snow White from primetime slots, replacing it with higher-performing films. Some locations even dropped it entirely in its second week, signaling an unusually fast decline. For Disney, which typically dominates theatrical space, this was uncharted territory.
All right, guys, I watched Snow White, so you don't have to. Let's get into it. Now, first things first, Snow White gets her name not from the fairness of her skin, as we obviously know Rachel Zegler would be a miscast in that sense. Instead, she gets her name from surviving a snowstorm.
My father told me long ago I braved a bitter storm of snow.
Her father and mother are king and queen to a utopian communist society. I'm not joking, guys. Everybody shares and is mindful of what each person is getting, and we spread our resources evenly, which is where this idea of fairness, as Snow White is the fairest of them all, is really presented in the film. Snow White is the fairest of them all because she has these communist sensibilities to share all resources with the farmers that till the land, and she got those sensibilities from her mother and her father.
Industry insiders speculated that theaters were making room for more profitable titles to avoid further losses. This decision wasn't just about numbers. It reflected a shift in audience interest. Moviegoers were simply not showing up for Snow White, making it impossible for theaters to justify keeping it in their best time slots. The rapid removal further cemented its status as a commercial failure.
My grandmother saw the original in the theaters, obviously, and I remember she told us that when people watched it originally in 1937 in the theaters, it was an amazing experience because for most people, it was the first color movie. And so, first of all, there was the visual of it. But second of all, people had so connected emotionally with the character of Snow White that when she eats from the apple and she dies, people were literally weeping in the theater because they liked the character of Snow White so much. It seems like it's difficult to imagine a situation in which anyone was weeping in the theater as Rachel Zegler's character goes into a coma after eating an apple.
There were actually raucous rounds of applause in the theater. Of course, I was the only person in the theater, so maybe that might explain it, but probably in other theaters around the country.
Zegler's past interviews played a huge role in the backlash. Clips of her calling the original 1937 Snow White weird and creepy were widely shared, further alienating Disney's core audience.
The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so.
Okay.
There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
She had previously mocked the idea of Snow White's love story, insisting that her version would not need a prince.
A lot of people will assume it's a love story just because we cast a guy in the movie, right. Andrew Burnap. All of Andrew's scenes could get cut. Who knows? It's Hollywood, baby.
While some praised her attempt to modernize the character, many felt she was dismissive of what made the original film so beloved.
And we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
Instead of celebrating the legacy of Snow White, her comments seemed to undermine it. These resurfaced clips solidified the idea that she had little respect for the source material, making audiences even less interested in seeing her version.
It's important to speak about her because Disney picked her to be a princess, right? They're doing all these remakes, and they decided they were going to remake Snow White, and they cast Gal Gadot as the Wicked Witch, and they cast Rachel Zegler as Snow White, and it's been an interesting casting because this woman is extraordinarily woke, as everyone is in Hollywood, but she's woke in a way that's quite deranged. You get cast for Snow White, and of course, if you are a business like Disney, you are leaning into what the movie Snow White meant to the people that were raised on it, people like me who watched Disney princess movies when the world was okay, and it was acceptable for us to dream about being a princess as a woman and meeting a handsome prince. But oh no, these big bad feminists now are telling us that's ridiculous. How dare you want to meet a handsome prince and be swept off of your feet and live happily ever after? No, you should want to be the prince. You should want to go out and fight the bad guys with a sword. And I'm like, I don't really want to do that.
In times of controversy, Hollywood usually rallies behind its stars. But in Zegler's case, the silence was deafening. No co-stars defended her, no directors spoke out in her favor, and even industry allies refrained from showing public support. This lack of solidarity suggested that Zegler was becoming an industry liability. Hollywood's usual damage control mechanisms, PR statements, interviews, and social media support were absent. The silence indicated that insiders were already stepping back, unwilling to risk their own reputations. For a young actress still establishing her career, this was a bad sign. The absence of support spoke louder than any statement, reinforcing the perception that she was on her own.
This remake is reportedly to have cost more than $200 million, and Disney seemed too scared to properly promote this movie.
it's quite interesting. Disney has had a terrible run of it because it's still as a studio trying to pump out the sort of material which might have been briefly thought to be a good idea in, I don't know, the summer of 2020, but really looks horribly dated and actually misreading the situation now. I mean, you know, I think I've said to you before, Rita, but in general, when they do these remakes and they're done by people who hate the original, like, you know, Snow White just has to be the woman she knows she can be and the leader she believes she can be. Maybe you should just invent a different story and call it something different. Disney seem to know that they've got another stinker of a movie here. I might be wrong, but they seem to know, rather like their pretty woke remake of Peter Pan a couple of years ago that bombed at the box office. Disney clearly know that they've got to silence their star, and that's why last week the huge launch of the film was in the middle of nowhere in Spain at a castle that was said to have inspired the original cartoon. The castle in question is far away from most people. About 100 people were invited, which you can't say is the average sort of movie premiere setup. I mentioned in my post column, but as well as sending her to a far-off castle, you can't help thinking that Disney's executives must have been wishing they could also give the star a poisoned apple that would set her to sleep for many years, so that she didn't appear in front of the world's press again anytime soon and diminish the movie she's meant to be promoting.
Reports emerged that studios were reconsidering Zegler for future roles. Once seen as a rising star, she was now being viewed as too controversial to lead major projects. Industry insiders revealed that discussions about her involvement in upcoming films had slowed, with some marketing teams worried about whether she could still sell tickets. Hollywood operates on perception, and Zegler's image had taken a massive hit. The controversy surrounding Snow White made her a risk, and in an industry that values public approval, that risk wasn't worth taking. While some actors recover from PR disasters, Zegler's handling of the backlash made it harder for her to bounce back.
Alex, what has been the reaction to Disney's latest expensive own goal?
Well, the reaction has been absolutely horrible. It is the worst box office from a Disney live action remake that they've ever done, and Dumbo didn't do very well, but this is actually performing much lower than Dumbo. And this couldn't happen to a better person, in my opinion. Rachel is literally the star of a Disney movie, and she acts like she's some sort of victim, and that's the sort of mentality that is just poisoning people's minds. Like, she acts like her life is so bad, considering she's a multi-millionaire actress living out every struggling actress's or actor's dream, and she just kind of, hand waves it like she's still some sort of victim, when in reality, she should be a movie star. She should be happy. She should be, apolitical, positive, but she's not that way. She loves Kamala Harris. She was, as woke as they are. And, the saying, go woke, get broke. And Disney's going to lose money on this movie. And I believe it only made less than $1 million in China, which is a huge indication that it will not do well globally.
Rachel Zegler was once hailed as Hollywood's next big thing. With a Golden Globe win and Steven Spielberg's backing for West Side Story, her future seemed bright. However, her approach to Snow White, both on and off screen, tarnished her rising stardom. Instead of gracefully addressing criticism, she doubled down, alienating audiences even further.
Snow White, what do you call it? Producer's son says Rachel Zegler hurt the film's box office with her actions in since-deleted comment. This is the exchange. Somebody at the top says, by the way, who's the first comment, Rob?
I couldn't see. It's cut off, so I'm not sure.
Your dad flew to New York City to reprimand a young actress? Any word on this? Because that's creepy as hell and uncalled for. People have the right to free speech. No? Shame on your father. So the guy responds. You really want to do this? Yeah, my dad, the producer of enormous piece of Disney IP with hundreds of millions of dollars on the line, had to leave his family to fly across the country to reprimand his 20-year-old employee for dragging her personal politics into the middle of promoting the movie for which she signed a multi-million-dollar contract to get paid and do publicity for. This is called adult responsibility and accountability, and her actions clearly hurt the film's box office. Free speech does not mean you're allowed to say whatever you want in your private employment without repercussions. Tens of thousands of people worked on that film, and she hijacked the conversation for her own immature desires at the risk of all the colleagues and crew, blue-collar workers who depend on that movie to be successful. Narcissism is not something to be coddled and encouraged. Tom.
Thank you, Jonah Platt. Oh my gosh, he's absolutely right.
The industry watched as public perception turned against her, and the silence from her peers only made things worse. In an era where celebrities are scrutinized more than ever, Zegler's failure to navigate the controversy effectively may have cost her career. The question now is whether she can recover, or if she has already become a cautionary tale. Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you in the next one.